When my daughter told me she wasn't expecting me for Christmas, I didn't argue. I didn't beg. I smiled, put the phone down, and made one call. By the time the decorations came down, her mortgage payment was gone, just like my place in her holiday plans. That was only the beginning, because sometimes silence is the sharpest answer, and lessons come with a price tag. You won't believe what happened next. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're watching from in the comments. The message came in just after sunrise, when I was sitting at the kitchen table with my coffee. My phone buzzed once, and I reached for it without much thought, expecting it to be one of those cheerful "Good morning, Dad" texts from my daughter, but instead, the words on the screen made my stomach tighten. "Dad, we weren't expecting you for Christmas this year." I stared at it for a few seconds, sure I'd read it wrong. I even set the phone down, rubbed my eyes, and looked again, hoping maybe the words had rearranged themselves into something warmer. But no, the message was short, cold, and final. No explanation, no apology, just a statement that landed like ice in my chest. I'd been looking forward to Christmas for weeks. The first snow had already fallen, and I'd been thinking about how my grandkids' eyes would light up when I walked in with my arms full of presents. I'd spent hours choosing those gifts, the Lego set my grandson had been hinting about since October, the soft knitted sweater in my granddaughter's favorite shade of yellow, the antique music box for my daughter, just like the one she loved when she was a child, each one wrapped with care, little name tags tied in red ribbon. I'd even booked my train ticket to weeks early to avoid the holiday rush. It was sitting on the counter beside me now, printed neatly, the dates circled in pen. My suitcase, half packed, waited in the corner of the bedroom with my warm wool coat draped over it. But now, none of it mattered. The words kept echoing in my head. "We weren't expecting you." Not "we'll miss you, Dad," or "maybe another time." Just that flat, detached line. It made me feel like an uninvited guest at my own family's table, as though my presence was a problem to be avoided. I took a slow sip of coffee, but it tasted bitter now. My hands were shaking slightly, so I set the cup down. For a long moment, I just sat there, staring out the window at the quiet, snow-covered street. I imagined the warmth of their living room, the tree glittering with lights, the smell of cinnamon and pine, and I wasn't going to be part of it. Somewhere deep in my chest, something fragile cracked. It wasn't just about Christmas. It was about all the years, all the love, all the times I thought I was building a place in their lives, and realizing now that maybe I was just filling in space when it was convenient for them. I leaned back in my chair, still clutching the phone, and my mind began to drift, not to the empty Christmas ahead, but to the years that had led me here. I remembered a time when my daughter's voice was filled with laughter every time she called me. She'd ring me late at night from her dorm room during her university years, panicked about tuition deadlines or the cost of textbooks, and I'd reassure her, "Don't worry about it, sweetheart. Focus on your studies. I'll take care of it." And I did, every semester, without fail, even when it meant working overtime shifts at the factory. Then there was the year she bought her first house, or rather, the year we bought it, because without my contribution to the down payment, she never would have qualified for the loan. I still remember standing in that empty living room with her, hearing her say, "Dad, this will always be your home too." I believed her, I truly did. And when life threw her off course, when she lost her job after the company downsized, she called me in tears. The mortgage payment was due in 5 days, and she didn't have the money. I didn't hesitate. I told her I'd handle it, just like I had handled every other storm she'd weathered. Month after month, I quietly paid that bill until she was back on her feet. I never kept a tally, never reminded her of the total. That's not what parents do. Christmas, though. Christmas was different. It was sacred to me. It was the one time of year when we were together, not because of a crisis, but because we wanted to be. I'd sit by the fire with a mug of cocoa, watching her and her family open their gifts. I loved hearing my grandkids squeal with excitement. I loved the way she'd look over and smile at me, as if to say, "See, Dad, this is the family you built." But somewhere along the way, that warmth had called. Now, instead of being wanted, I was not expected. The words felt heavy, as if they carried all the years I'd given without asking for anything in return, only to find that maybe my place in her life wasn't as solid as I thought. And deep down, something inside me began to stir, a mix of sadness and the sharp, unfamiliar edge of anger. I couldn't stand not knowing why. The message alone was bad enough, but the silence that followed it, no call, no further explanation, gnawed at me. My daughter had always been direct with me, even when the truth was uncomfortable. So why now, of all times, did she choose to hide behind vague words? I picked up the phone and called her. It rang longer than usual before she answered, her voice carrying the polite stiffness people use with strangers. "Hi, Dad," she said, as though nothing had happened. I didn't waste time. Why wasn't I expected for Christmas? I asked. There was a pause. "It's just. The house is going to be full this year," she replied. "You know, kids running around, and it's just better this way, less chaos." Her tone was light, but it didn't match the heaviness in my chest. I knew there was more to it. My daughter had never in her life turned me away for a holiday. Not when money was tight. Not when she'd been going through a divorce. Not even the year her mother passed. Something else was going on. "Full?" I pressed. "Full with who?" She hesitated. "Well, you know, Mark's family is coming over this year." Mark, my son-in-law, we'd always been cordial, but never close. He was the kind of man who measured people by what they could offer him in status or convenience. I could feel my pulse quickening. So there's room for them, but not for me. "Dad, it's not like that," she said quickly. "It's just easier for everyone if I'm not there, I finish for her." She went quiet. That silence told me more than any excuse could. I ended the call politely, but inside I felt like the floor had shifted beneath me. Later that afternoon, my suspicions were confirmed. A mutual friend, someone who'd known our family for decades, called to check in on me. I told her, reluctantly, what had happened. Her voice softened with hesitation. "I'm not sure if I should tell you this, but I think you should know." She explained that she'd been at a small gathering the week before, and my daughter's husband had been there, laughing with a group of people. He'd mentioned how this Christmas will be perfect without the old man slowing everything down, and that it's about time the holiday felt fun again. I sat in my chair, gripping the phone so tightly my knuckles ached. It wasn't just about space. It wasn't about chaos. It was about me. About them deciding that I no longer fit into the picture. In that moment, a cold clarity settled over me. For the first time in years, I stopped feeling like a father trying to be included and started feeling like a man who had been used. And was finally seeing it. I sat there long after the call ended, the winter light fading outside my window, leaving the room in a dim, grey stillness. My hands rested on the table, motionless, but my mind was a storm. Every word from my daughter, every smirk I imagined on my son-in-law's face, replayed in my head. The betrayal burned strangely. It wasn't like an argument you could patch up. It was deeper, like discovering that someone had been quietly packing your bags out of their life, piece by piece, while you were still living in it. I turned my head and saw the envelope from the bank lying by the fruit bowl. The top of the page was still visible. Mortgage payment reminder. Her mortgage payment, the one I had been covering for the past 12 months. I hadn't told anyone about it, not even her. I just made the payments automatically, thinking I was helping her keep her family secure. I thought it was my way of easing her burden, my way of showing love without words. But now, staring at that paper, I felt something shift inside me, the warmth behind those payments evaporating, leaving only a cold, clean awareness. They didn't just take my time and presence for granted. They took my money, my effort, my sacrifice without a flicker of gratitude. And now, without hesitation, they'd cut me out to make room for people who, in their eyes, mattered more. I leaned back in my chair, breathing slowly. A part of me was tempted to call her immediately and say it outright. If I'm not good enough for your table, I'm not good enough for your bills either. But I didn't. I decided something else in that moment. If they didn't want me in their Christmas, they weren't going to get my generosity either. I reached for the phone not to call her, but to call the bank. My voice was calm when I spoke to the customer service agent, but my heart was pounding in my chest. Yes, I said evenly, I'd like to cancel an automatic payment on an account. That was it. The decision was made, and strangely, as I hung up the phone, I felt lighter. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual. The air in my apartment was cold, but my mind was sharp, almost unnervingly calm. I sat at the table with my coffee, staring at my phone, thinking about all the ways this could go. I could send her a message right away, something blunt, something that would sting. But I stopped myself. No, this wasn't about yelling or slamming doors. This was about clarity, about finally putting things in the right order. I picked up the phone again, dialed the bank, and confirmed the cancellation. The woman on the other end read the details back to me. That's all set, sir. The payment will no longer be processed. When I ended the call, I just sat there, letting the silence sink in. That one small decision felt bigger than anything I'd done in years. It was like reclaiming a piece of myself that I hadn't realized I'd been giving away. Around noon, I walked into the bedroom and saw my suitcase still half packed from before her message. I unzipped it and started unpacking, folding the warm wool sweater back into the drawer, placing the wrapped presents neatly on the top shelf of my closet. The gifts would stay with me this year. Then, I did something I hadn't done in decades. I made a Christmas plan for myself. No crowded dinner table where I had to earn my place. No forced small talk with people who didn't want me there. I booked a small cabin 2 hours away, overlooking a frozen lake. Just me, a fire, and the quiet. That afternoon, I finally sent my daughter a message. Merry Christmas. I won't make it this year either. Enjoy your time. Short, polite. No bitterness she could point to. But I knew, and deep down, I think she'd know soon enough, that something had shifted. Because while she was setting the table for her perfect holiday, the ground beneath her feet was about to change. Christmas came and went without a single word from her. I spent the holiday, exactly as I'd planned, alone, in the quiet cabin by the frozen lake. The fire crackled low, the snow whispered against the windows, and for the first time in years, I didn't have to pretend I belonged somewhere I didn't. By the time I returned home, the world had moved on from Christmas. Storefronts were already replacing holiday displays with New Year's sale banners. I slipped back into my usual routine, though something in me had changed. It was the second week of January when the phone rang. I saw her name flash on the screen. My first instinct was to let it go to voicemail, but something told me to pick up. Her voice was tight, trembling. Dad, did you forget something? The bank, they called me this morning. Said the mortgage payment wasn't made. I didn't answer right away. I could almost hear her chewing on the silence, unsure of how to push further. Well, she pressed. I took a slow breath. No, I didn't forget. I cancelled it. The line went dead quiet. I imagined her standing in her kitchen, the weight of my words hitting her harder than she'd expected. Dad, why? Her voice cracked on the word. I leaned back in my chair, my eyes on the pale winter sunlight spilling through the window. Because I figured if I'm not part of your Christmas, I shouldn't be part of your bills either. There was a small gasp, followed by a sniffle. It wasn't. It's not like that. Mark thought. She stopped, like she'd just realized she'd said too much. Mark thought I slowed things down, made the holiday less fun. I asked, my voice sharper now. She didn't deny it. And that silence told me everything. You've taken my time, my money, my love, and handed my place in your life to someone else, I said quietly. So now, I'm just taking back what's mine. On the other end, she began to cry, softly at first, then harder. But I didn't feel the same pull I used to, the urge to fix things, to comfort her. This time, I let the silence do the talking. 3 days later, there was a knock at my door. It was early evening, and the sky outside was washed in that pale blue just before nightfall. I wasn't expecting anyone, so when I opened it, the sight of her standing there took me by surprise. She looked smaller somehow, not in size, but in presence. Her hair was pulled back messily, her eyes rimmed red. She clutched her coat tightly around her as if the January wind had found its way into her bones. "Dad," she said softly, her voice carrying a mix of hesitation and shame. I stepped aside, letting her in without a word. She walked past me, her eyes drifting over the small, tidy living room. On the coffee table sat the gifts I'd bought for her kids, still wrapped in the same red ribbon. She stared at them for a long moment before turning back to me. "I messed up," she said finally, her voice breaking. "I let him talk me into it, I thought. I thought it wouldn't matter if you missed one Christmas. But it did. It mattered more than I realized." I didn't answer right away. I just stood there, hands in my pockets, letting her words hang in the air. She took a shaky breath. "Mark was wrong. I was wrong. You've done more for me than anyone in my life. And I treated you like you were disposable. I'm so sorry." Her eyes welled again, but I could see she wasn't crying just for me. She was crying for herself too, for the realization of what she'd almost lost. "I'll always love you," I said quietly. "But love doesn't mean I have to keep letting myself be hurt. Forgiveness, that's going to take time." She nodded slowly, like she already knew that would be my answer. Her gaze flicked back to the gifts on the table. I walked over, picked them up, and handed them to her. "These are for the kids," I said. "They don't need to be caught in the middle of this." She held them to her chest, whispering another thank you if it might undo the past few weeks. When she left, I stood by the window and watched her walk down the snowy path to her car. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel cruel. What I felt was something quieter, steadier, the kind of peace that comes from finally drawing a line no one else will draw for you. The next morning, I called the travel agency and booked a trip I'd been dreaming about 4 years, a place by the ocean, where the air smelled like salt and the days passed without expectation. For once, I was spending my time, my money, and my heart exactly where they were wanted. And that, I realized, was the best gift I could give myself.